Welcome back, everybody. Yesterday's work in the garage, some more little tasks here and there. Started off with making the main power conduit run through the right wing. Decided since I've got the light in and wired up, I might as well get the conduit in. I tried to run it in such a way that it's not going to be in the way of getting my arm in there later to rivet the bottom wing skins on, but I also don't want to try it. Well, I can't run it after the skins are on, so it's got to go in at some point. Also made sure I had just enough flex in the conduit between each of those hangers so that, the wing had flex. The two you see me installing there is where that T is going. That is going to be for the roll servo cable to come out. The reason those two are offset to the back is I just wanted to make sure, absolutely sure, that I had plenty of clearance between the conduit and the aileron push rod that's going to go through there later on. The rest of them, I just centered them on the bay, on the leading edge side there. And the whole system worked really well. Those hangers worked out well. I 3D printed a little wedge tool to spread them apart so I could easily slide them down the conduit where I want them to go. They got a little rib inside of them, and they lock onto the conduit. You just drill them and rivet them in place. I've got some rubber end pieces for them to seal out the ends and provide some strain relief for the cables coming in and out of the conduit, but pretty easy. So that one's in. There's going to be another one going through that bottom lightning hole, I think, and that'll be a comm wire if I decide to run anything out in the wing, and then the other wing will get set up the same way. Made for a pretty neat, clean installation. And then I went on and fabricated the lens, there you go, for the left wing. So both lenses are now done and ready to go. And the more enjoyable part was I decided to sit down and go ahead and build the Nav strobe lights from the FLYLEDS kit. These absolutely do not need to be built right now. They're not going to get installed in those wingtips right now. But I'm just doing little stuff right now to fill my time while I'm waiting on other things. I've got some hardware showing up, screws and whatnot, to mount those landing lights in the wings. None of the screws I have fit the nut plates that came with the light bracket kit. And since I didn't buy lights from Ductworks, I don't have the screws for them. So I had to order some screws. I also ordered some screws and hardware to be able to put in ground studs in the end of the wing there, so I've got something to ground the lights to. But while I'm waiting for those to show up, which they should be here today or tomorrow, I think, I decided to go ahead and work on these. So you see me getting the wingtips out, and what you got to do is lay those PCBs on there because they're slightly oversized. Trace out, make them perfectly match the wingtips you have, and then you take them over. I took them over to the disc sander and just sanded them down smooth to the line. You saw me block sanding the wingtip there. It's because it's got that assembly line right in the middle. It was keeping the PCBs from laying flat. Eventually that middle part's going to get cut out, but for now I just wanted them to lay flat so I could get good marks and get them trimmed adequately. The directions from FLYLEDS are excellent. There's some humor thrown in there too, which I totally appreciated. And first step, you take the white LEDs that end up being your strobes, and you have to bend all of the contact tabs down and into an L shape so that they can sit on the pad and you can solder them up later. So do that times 12. Then you add thermal paste, Little tiny dab will do you, and then smear it between two of them so that you kind of spread it out, making sure that it's not too thick, just like when I did the thermal paste on the other lights. If you do stick around until the end, I do test these, so you'll get a chance to see what they look like. Anyhow, now you, once you have thermal paste on there, you go ahead and put them on the pads. They have a little tiny mark showing which side is positive and which is negative, so you want to make sure you get the orientation correct. That's where the magnifying glass comes in handy. These were a bit harder to solder. They're big pads. It takes a fair amount of heat to get the solder to start flowing, and there's a fair amount of solder that's got to go into those pads. So just got to be patient with it. Make sure it gets good and hot. I was a little worried about overheating the LED, but directions tell you not to worry about it. They can take the heat, and it was definitely true. They had no issues with it. The hardest part is on the very first one, just making sure you're not moving the thing all over the place while you're trying to get the solder into it. If you do move it though, it's easy enough to heat it up, twist it, rotate it just where you want it to be, and then let the solder solidify again. That'll hold it in place so you can do the other side. And I'll spare you, we're not going to go through every single one of these, but go through a lot of it. It was pretty cathartic. Had a movie going in the background, just kind of an enjoyable way to spend the evening. So I started on these, then I took a break and decided I needed to go shower to get all that fiberglass dust off from all the sanding I did on those boards. I did wear the respirator too, because you don't want to be breathing any of that stuff in. So came back out all cleaned up to do the nav lights, which are these tinier LEDs. Same process, put a little thermal paste on there and then get them on the board. These are even harder to see the polarity orientation on, so you want to make sure you're correct on them. First part, they just have you put them on there just to get them on the pads, and then I'll go through the magnifying glass here in a minute and start rotating them. There you go. Making sure you've got the orientation right. The foot is stamped with a positive and a negative. It's pretty hard to see, but the negative side also has a notch, which is way easier to see. Once I was happy I had the polarity correct, go ahead and solder these up. Had to turn the soldering iron down. Don't need the same kind of heat for these that you do for those big LEDs. Overall, it was a very enjoyable kit to build. Thoroughly happy with the quality of the product, the end results. The directions were great. Can't say enough good things about them so far. Very, very, very nicely made. I'm probably a couple of years away from being able to fully enjoy them, but I think these little side projects that need to get done kind of help keep the motivation going too, though. It gives you something else to do other than dimpling holes and riveting all the time. So now you flip the board over and you have to populate the resistors. And these are some big resistors. They will generate some heat. So you do not want them sitting directly in contact with the board. The directions recommend a couple of millimeters, or a popsicle stick is a good guide, which I just happen to have popsicle sticks. So setting the height with the popsicle sticks, and then when I go to solder them, I'm just going to use the stick as an actual spacer to make sure I get them evenly spaced. So stick the stick in there, go to the back side, Solder all the tabs. Rinse and repeat. You do have to be mindful about what resistors go where. There's 3 different values total on between the 2 boards, or the 2 sides, I should say. But the directions, again, make it very, very easy. And they sort the parts out by color and bag. Also makes it easy. Now you take the connectors, put those on and solder them in place. And be mindful when you put all this stuff together, the only thing that should be on that front side of the board is the LEDs. Everything else goes on the back side, which is why you can see those wingtips need to get cut out so they can clear all those components. Also, earlier in the day, I got the casters in for the wing stand, so might get a glimpse of it sitting in the background there, but it is now sitting on casters. So once I get those screws in to get the lights in and the lenses mounted, I can pull that right wing out and get it in the cradle and start making some more room in the garage. Now just using a little isopropyl alcohol, cleaning up the boards. Everywhere the flux melts out, you get a little burn mark, but it cleans right off. They give you a ribbon cable to connect the 2 boards. It's not the easiest stuff in the world to strip, but it is handy. It makes for a cleaner look. So you get the ribbon cable installed between the 2, and then it leaves terminals where you connect the wires later on. Alright, getting out the power supply. They say you can test these on 9 volts to kind of save your eyeballs. I wanted to see the full Monty, so I got out the 12 volt power supply, and we're going to try them with 12 volts. First up, there are the white strobes. I guess there's a taxi mode where those will come on solid for you on the ground to give you some area lighting, but otherwise they flash and they become your strobe lights. And now we'll test the nav. There's all the reds. Onto the green board. There's the green. Can't stress enough how insanely bright those are. Anyhow, it was a lot of fun to do. Hope you enjoyed it. If you got any questions, leave them down below. And as always, stick around for the next one. See ya.